Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookish Realm and I am back with another video. So today is day number 18 of Vlogmas. Day number 18. And I know you're probably looking at the title of this video and you're like, are you really already starting your best of list? Why, yes, I am, because I do not want to go into 2021 making these best of lists. I did that last year coming into 2020 and I just don't want to do it. So I am going to get all of my best of list out the way before 2020 ends. Is there potential for books to be left out? Yes, but it's okay. It's perfectly fine. It's not a big deal. I will be okay. I have enough books to go off of what I want to label as my best. If I need to make an amendment and do a video like that, it can be done. So I decided to do this a little differently this year. I kind of did it sort of last year. I don't think I had as much organization as I do this year. So I actually separated my videos into categories. So these categories are going to be books that I think are great, that I absolutely adored, that I really enjoyed, and they are the best within their category. Then there's going to be a video that is going to be the best of the best. So these were my absolute favorites of 2020. Now these subcategories are going to each have in between 8 to 10 books. Some of them are going to be multiple genres lumped into one section together because I just didn't have enough of each genre to create this huge, you know, category breakdown. Like today's video is best fiction of 2020, which is going to include everything from like contemporary to realistic fiction to historical fiction, and we're just going to lump it together and call it fiction. There's going to be a category for science fiction, fantasy, and mystery / thrillers. There's a category for middle grade, there's a category for romance, and there's a category for graphic novels, comics, and manga. And I separated, like I said, the categories based on how much I have read, and it definitely has been a heavy romance and graphic novel, manga, and comics year, most definitely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about 10 books that fit under the best fiction category, but before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about the song. So for this, I chose The Most Wonderful Time of Year because this is the season that everybody loves. When we get these best of and worst of lists, everybody's like, oh my gosh, I love watching these, because when you look at what people have read and then you kind of compare it to what their best books were, what their worst books were, and then you look at your own list, it is kind of fun. So I did decide to go with this song just to kickstart my best of 2020 list. So The Most Wonderful Time, and I said of the year, but I think the song is just Most Wonderful Time, was written by Edward Pola and George Weil. It was released in 1963 by Andy Williams. It has been covered by many artists and is most definitely featured in lots of advertising. I can't tell you how many commercials we probably watched in the month of December that featured this song. In 2009, Billboard actually voted it as one of the top holiday songs, top 10 holiday songs that has been played since the year 2001. All right, y'all, so let's go ahead and jump into the books. Some of these you won't be surprised by. Some of these you're going to be like, really? Because, you know, 2020 was a crap year, and I think probably about the time that everything started happening with COVID, I mentally just could not handle it. So I actually stopped reading and I was doing a lot of TV watching. So I took like a month off from reading and I completely forgot what I had read in January and February. So when I had to go back through and look at the books that I've read, because at the time of filming this, I'm probably about 10 books shy of reading 300 things for 2020. So I was surprised. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I read that this year. So some of these you probably haven't heard me talk about in this entire series, maybe not today, but in this entire series, because it's been a while. It's been a long time. So the first one that I have on my list is Love Boat Taipei, and this one is by Abigail Heng Wen, and this one came out this year. It's a 2020 release, and it is about a young girl by the name of Ever, who is an aspiring dancer. She, I believe, gets into the Tisch School of Arts at NYU, and her parents find out. They're not happy, so they send her to this program, because I don't want to call it a camp, but it's like a program that is, they nickname it Love Boat Taipei, and it is interesting because we get to see her kind of deal with familial expectations and becoming who she wants to be. There's some conversation about racism. There is conversation about traditional values versus modern standards, and a lot of this book was particularly messy. I'm not gonna lie. It was a lot of drama that happened in this book, and I can see why people don't enjoy the drama because of the fact that it was just so present, and it was a long book. I think it was over 400 pages, and a lot of it was dramatic. But I loved it. I think I loved it because it was so interesting watching Ever go through this cultural experience, being Asian American, and then having to go into this full immersion course where she had to become more in touch with her heritage, and she just wasn't used to that, and she's trying to come into her own and break away from what her family wants her to do. And I think I just liked watching her progress. This book is very much so sex positive. It is about finding yourself and finding that balance. I enjoyed it enough that I read it once physically, and then I ended up reading it the second time through audio. So this is a YA contemporary that I highly recommend, and for me to have read it twice in 1 year says a lot, because that's how much I really enjoyed it. And I hope that we get a second one. I don't think there's a release date posted yet, but I hope it happens. The next one that I have on this list is one that I have already talked about in one of my other Vlogmas videos, but this was one of the fiction, it's like historical fiction, kind of, sort of, but then not really. It's kind of hard to categorize this one, and I'm not sure where to put it, so I just put it in this category. But it is The Gray Shear by Kim Liggett, and this is one, like I said, I read this one earlier this year, and this is about young women who end up getting betrothed to the men in their society, and then they end up getting sent away for a year, which is their gray shear. But when they go on their gray shear, they are sent to this undisclosed area, and a lot of the young women don't make it back. So we're following our protagonists as they make their journey into their gray shear, and it is a creepy book. It's creepy because I think that the way that they end up treating each other in terms of this society of how women end up being pinned against each other type of situation, it was rough, and there is no lack of violence in this book, and I definitely think that this is one that I want to read again, because the ending of this one is very ambiguous, and I think that there's some debate on what actually ends up happening to the protagonist at the end of the book. But when the big reveal comes, I was very surprised about how that played out. But this is definitely a conversation on women maneuvering a patriarchal society. It definitely has Handmaid's Tale vibe to it from what I have seen of the TV show. I haven't read the book yet, but it definitely does have that vibe, and it is, whew, it's an intense one, but it's one that I really did enjoy. I really did enjoy this one, and I think that people were talking about it because I believe it came out in 2019, but it came out towards the end of the year, and I find that when books are released towards the end of the year, I feel like they don't get as much buzz as those that are released in the beginning and definitely during like the middle of the year, like summer releases. So I don't know how many people have actually picked up on this one, but I liked it. I really liked it, and I'm hoping to do a reread soon. The next one that I have on this list is Solo by Kwame Alexander, and this was the first Kwame Alexander book that I'd ever read. I have read 2 of his this year. I plan to read more next year because he's just phenomenal. The man has a way with words. But Solo focuses on a main character that is dealing with some issues associated with his father. So his father deals with an addiction, and he was a musician, and I believe the main character, I'm awful at main character names by the way, but I believe the main character's name is Blade, and he is very much so struggling with how to cope with the fact that he has an absent father due to addiction, and he's trying to navigate and figure out his life. So what ends up happening is that he ends up, it's kind of like a two-line story. So you get this dual line or dual perspective of the story, where there's one part of the story where we get the opportunity to learn more about his home life and his relationship with his girlfriend and his aspirations in being a musician. And then there's this other line where he goes on a journey of self-discovery after finding some information out, which I won't say because it's kind of a spoiler. And he ends up going on this trip to Ghana, where we then further explore this conversation about forgiveness. And there is this deep conversation about whether addiction is just pure recklessness or whether it's an actual illness. So this is a deep one. I would recommend listening to this one on audio because there's actual music on the audiobook, and that's because I think that Kwame actually wrote the lyrics to the songs. And I think with his audiobooks, if it has anything to do with music, I believe that Kwame actually includes music on the audiobooks. So definitely check this one out on audio. More complex than what I expected, but one that I really enjoyed, and I think definitely was elevated because I listened to it on audio. The next one on this list is Lovely War by Julie Berry. So this is a YA historical fiction told through the perspective of ancient Greek gods and goddesses, and it takes place partly during World War I and then partly during World War II. And it is amazing because the gods and goddesses have some role in what's going on, but Aphrodite is actually telling the story of these four main characters who have love interests within the four of them. And it is her telling the story because she was caught having an affair with Ares, who is the god of war. And everybody plays a role in this some way, somehow, and it is breathtakingly beautiful in a lot of areas. I think that I like the additional aspects of us understanding the relationship between these four characters through the eyes of the gods and goddesses. And these four characters are pretty interesting in the fact that they each have some sort of, I don't want to say baggage, but they have these issues that they're trying to work through. We have a Black main character that is in the military, and we have these huge conversations about what's or how Black soldiers were treated during World War I and World War II. Even though they were fighting for the US, there was still no level of respect there. So there's this huge historical part of information that we are learning. We have a character that is really into music. Actually, we have two characters that are really into music, which is where Apollo comes in. And basically, because of them, we actually have music in the audiobook that was specifically written for this book. So like Solo, I think that this is one of those books where I feel like you probably should listen to it on audio to get the full experience, because I think it just adds another level to the book and it makes it so interesting. And this is a full cast narration as well. So yeah, I know it feels like I'm just pushing the audiobook, but the book itself is really good, and it's a new take on historical fiction that I hadn't seen done before. The next one that I have on this list is The Voting Booth by Brandy Colbert, which is a book that I low-key feel like kind of flew under the radar a little bit. It focuses on two main characters by the name of Marva and Duke, and Duke is actually going to the polls to vote, where he actually gets stopped and he can't vote. And Marva is a huge advocate for people going to the polls and voting, and she works, or basically enlists herself to help Duke figure out where he's actually supposed to be voting and why he hasn't been able to cast his ballot. And this was a very timely book because I think a lot of what Brandy Colbert was doing in this book is really discussing that conversation or that question of why should I vote when my vote doesn't count. And that's in a huge response to the low numbers of voters that went out in 2016, and we ended up with what we ended up with in 2016. And I think that she was trying to send the message that your vote really does count. And I think we saw that with the 2020 election. Like, every vote definitely does count. So it's about more than that though, and what is so unique about this book is that it takes place over the course of a day, and I'm very weary of books like that because that means that you literally have to develop your characters and create this extensive plot that happens in one day, and it takes great craftsmanship to be able to do something of that nature, and she does it very, very well. I think that we get a lot of the character development because there are flashbacks that are part of the book, but there's a lot of discussion through the experiences of the two characters where we look at identity, we look at police brutality, we look at what does it mean to be Black, and how a lot of Black people go through that period in their life of not feeling Black enough, especially when we're looking at our main character Duke, who is biracial, and he's had to question his Blackness, and Marva goes to a predominantly white school where she's questioned her Blackness a lot. And I like that both of our characters are flawed, so we're not dealing with one perfect character or two perfect characters who are just kind of having these conversations. Like, they're both flawed characters that have a lot to learn over the course of this day. And it's contemporary, so there is you know, a romance most likely that may happen, but I think that it wasn't necessarily focused on that. It was very, very, very much so focused on the advocacy that goes behind voting and how we can do better about stopping voter suppression and getting people out to the polls. So if you haven't heard of The Voting Booth by Brandy Colbert, please check that one out, y'all. The next one that I have on this list is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, which I'm pretty sure that everyone has heard of. You Should See Me in a Crown. Reese Witherspoon picked it as her book club pick, so everybody has read this book. But I really enjoyed this book, and I decided to put it in my best of list because of the themes and the topics that it handles, and just the character development was done very, very well. If you did not know, which I'd be surprised, You Should See Me in a Crown is about a Black girl by the name of Liz who has aspirations to go to school to play music. She has a scholarship that she's going for. Unfortunately, things fall apart with her scholarship, so she needs the money to be able to go to school. And then she remembers that her school actually gives scholarship money away to the individuals that are crowned prom king and prom queen. So she decides to enter the prom, and this is a book that definitely discusses Blackness and queerness and grief. It handles grief so well, and I think I had read this one like just coming off of a book that didn't handle grief very well, like the death of a close family member happening off page, in both situations happening off page, and like when this one did it so well and the other one didn't do it well at all. So it was nice kind of coming into this book seeing where grief was handled in such a tactful and very responsible way. I also liked that this book was about Black joy, and while we were looking at a character that was coming into her identity and learning about her queerness, I think that it wasn't so much about the negative, but it was more about the positive and coming together and changing, and a lot of it has to do with what proms really should look like. I think we're coming past, and it's not everywhere because there are still areas where kids can't go to prom with who they want to go to prom with, but it is having that conversation of the image of the traditional prom needs to change, and that these kids should be able to go to prom as whoever they want to be, and they should be able to take whoever they want to take to prom. But this was a beautiful book. It was marvelous. If you for all of these, if you have not read them, like, definitely check them out. But this was a phenomenal one, and I can't wait to reread this one. The next one that I have on this list is Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. I had to include this one. I think most of the books on this list, if not all of them, are YA except for this title, because I think all the other adult books that I read fell underneath science fiction, fantasy, mystery, and thriller, which is crazy. But Red at the Bone is a story in flashbacks in some sort. It starts off with a young girl who is supposed to be wearing a dress. It's kind of like her coming out, and the dress that she's wearing is the same dress that her mother was supposed to wear. And there's a story as to why her mother couldn't wear that dress, and we get to see not only the parent story but the grandparent story as well. And it's this level of connectivity that happens not only just with Jacqueline Woodson's poetic writing, but we get to see how our life experiences impact those that come after us. And it's very important to acknowledge that how we experience life is how we continue to live our lives and how we teach others how to live their lives. So I always think about the fact, because that may be confusing, but I always think about the fact of what have I experienced in the time that I've been on this earth that has changed my way of thinking or has motivated me to behave in certain ways, and will I teach my daughter the same thing? I have now grown into my identity as a Black woman, and I know what comes with that, and I am going to raise my daughter in the same way, and that's solely based off of my experiences. And you see this domino effect that happens with each family member, and it's heartbreaking in some parts. You see pain in a lot of parts, and you really get to know these characters at their core, because you're like, why would this person make this decision? Why would they do that? And then Jacqueline Woodson allows you to see those life experiences that made that character behave in the way that they're behaving. And it's just well done. I mean, to be a book that can't be more than 250 pages, I think read at the bone is a poetic and beautiful book. There's no way that I could have made this list at all without including a Jacqueline Woodson book. I'm sure she's going to pop up somewhere else in these top videos, but this is one that was just, it was good. And I really need to get a physical copy of this one because it's just that amazing. The next one that I have on this list is Now That I Found You by Christina Forrest. This one came out this year, and this is another YA contemporary that focuses on a character by the name of Evie. And Evie is this huge, or she's this up and coming star. She's a granddaughter of a famous actress, and she has something happen, and then her career is completely ruined. So she heads to New York to go stay with her grandmother. Something goes wrong, and then her grandmother disappears. So she teams up with this guy by the name of Milo, and they hunt down her grandmother. What I loved about this, because I'm not gonna lie to you, this book is sometimes a little difficult, and it's still a top book, but just being completely transparent, sometimes it can be a little difficult because Evie is going through a maturing process through this book. So she comes off as mean a lot of times, and she is mean a lot of times, but I think that was intentional in Forrest's writing of this book. But at the same time, that's an element sometimes that challenged me as a reader. But this is about self-appreciation or self-fulfillment or valuing yourself, in contrast to seeking validation from others. And Evie definitely is a character who seeks validation from others. She needs to be affirmed by everyone around her, and inevitably that leads to her having a low self-esteem. She's not as confident, I think, as she appears to be, because she's only confident in terms of how others see her and not how she sees herself. And this book is not so much just about a contemporary romance, which I think that some people will go in thinking that, oh, this is just a YA contemporary romance. It's not just about falling in love with someone else, but it's also about falling in love with yourself. And I felt that on a different level, because I think we all struggle with that. But I'm like, from my personal experience, I definitely struggle with that growing up, even in my early 20s, with needing to feel validated by other people and not having enough confidence in myself. And this reminded me of that so much, not in a triggering way, but just recognizing how far people come when they realize, like, I have to love myself before anybody can love me, and I don't need to be loved by everyone. That doesn't define my worth as human. So definitely a great book. I think I read this one probably in like 2 days. It's a really quick read, but I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Okay, y'all, so I actually lied. I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a list of 10. It's actually a list of 9. So forgive me, because I had one on this list that was actually gonna end up being a fiction book, but it actually goes on the mystery thriller and SFF list. So they'll be split into 9 at 9, but don't worry about that. So the last one that I actually have on this list is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. And I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed this one. I mean, I like Elizabeth Acevedo. I think BookTube loves Elizabeth Acevedo, but I mean, this was a good one, and I think it was because of the fact that I was getting the voices of two young women with two varying experiences but still connected at the same time. So if you didn't know, it's about these two young girls who actually are sisters. They don't know that they're sisters, but they find out that they're sisters because of a plane crash that happens that had their dad on the plane. And this is based on a real flight that took off from New York going to the Dominican Republic. And I think I talked about this in another video as well, probably my audiobook recommendations video, where this is a book that brought light to that flight, but also covers so many different things as well. And this was just impactful. I mean, it was just beautifully done. Just two beautiful voices trying to navigate life without their father, who they both adored and loved, but at the same time they're so pissed at him because he didn't tell them that the other existed. And Elizabeth Acevedo does a great, I mean a beautiful job navigating how do we miss someone, grieve someone, and be angry at them at the same time. Like, how do you navigate such polarizing emotions? And for me, her ability to do that with these two characters was like top notch. And I really appreciated this book, and I listened to it on audio, but I want to go back and read it again and annotate it. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about Clap When You Land, so you know, everyone knows about Elizabeth Acevedo, and of course her covers are absolutely beautiful underneath. Like, that's gorgeous. That's just beautiful. It's a beautiful cover. All right, y'all, so those are my top fiction books of 2020. I thought it was going to be a list of 10, but it is a list of 9. But all of these lists will have at least in between 8 to 10, and then my final big list, like I said, will have 20 books on it, 24 2020. And I'm glad it was 20, because I don't, if I had to go lower than 20, I don't know what I was going to do, because I read a lot of good ones this year. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button. In the comment box below, tell me one of your favorite fiction books of the year, whether that's like contemporary, historical fiction, just something that you could lump into the category of fiction, which technically is everything, but no SFF, no mysteries, no thrillers, just either contemporary, historical fiction, what do we call realistic fiction. Tell me one of the books that you enjoyed in the year of 2020. If you're looking for ways to support my channel, the links will be down below in the description box. If you are looking for ways to follow me on social media, that'll be in the description box as well. And I'll be back with another video tomorrow.